I'm going to call us to order. Maybe I should let you take your coat off first. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm okay. There.
Okay,
Go for
so first thing we had was take action on minutes from October 16th. I didn't have any changes, but they were very thorough, actually.
Excellent.
Really?
You're hired for life.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you could bullet point it a little more or whatever
Okay.
you wanted, because it's really quite
Okay.
dense, and it looks like a lot of work, in my opinion. And I think even if you made it simpler, it would still capture what
Okay.
happened, so feel free.
Okay.
I liked that you added the Zoom link on the bottom. I don't know if you've been doing that and I missed it, but I like that.
Yeah, I do. Just if,
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Because yeah.
So people can go
Nothing
back and
else
watch.
going
But
on.
yeah, they were great minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I make a motion that we approve the minutes
Second.
from October 16th?
All in favor? Any discussion? No, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right, unanimous, thank you. Okay, so first on the agenda, we have a special guest. We wanted to talk about the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant Program. Lisa had reached out to me saying she wanted to work on an expression of interest, and could we get somebody from the MVB program here? So Oleander, I reached out to Oleander, and you are acting, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so we're about to lose you to another part of the state or another organization or something, right? Where are you going?
Oh, I'm staying with the state. I'm just shifting into a statewide role. That's it.
Oh, congratulations. Okay.
Nice.
Thank you.
So let me just tell you a little bit about our committee, and this will be good for Angela to know because you're on deck after this. So there was a Kampoosa Stewardship Committee that was formed. I don't know what year it was formed. Do you know?
I'm guessing it was 1990.
1990,
yeah.
okay. And that had different, okay, got it. Had lots of different organizations as a part of it. And the idea was that all these different stakeholders, from Mass DOT to the Tennessee Gas Pipeline Organization to the town of Lee and Stockbridge, because part of this ACEC is also in the town of Lee, which is our town next door, would get together. Then, and they worked through a lot of things and I think did a lot of great work. And then the committee just kind of fizzled out for a lot of different reasons. So we were put back together about a year ago with, in a different capacity and a different focus. We're now a town committee, where previously the committee was really driven by the Stockbridge Land Trust. So we do have the president of the Land Trust is on our committee. He's not with us today, but we're a different makeup, I would say. But we still have the focus to try to protect the flora, fauna, and water quality of the ACEC, but also the environment, the environs, the adjacent areas, the downstream area, et cetera, around the Fen. So, hi, come on in. Are you here for the Kampoosa meeting?
Here for about the fountain?
No, that must be in the other room. There's another room straight down and to the right. Go all the way to the end of the hallway and take a right. There's another meeting room.
Over there, at the other end of the building.
Yeah.
They just sent me here.
Oh, no, we're not here for, well, this is the Kampoosa Stewardship Committee. I'm sorry.
Oh, maybe I got the wrong day.
Okay.
Well, your road boss told me it was tonight, but maybe I got the wrong time.
Okay,
All right, well, thank you.
you're welcome.
Have a good evening.
So we, like I said, we've only been around for a year. There's 6 members. It's not the variety of stakeholders all together on one committee that it used to be. Doesn't mean it won't get to that at some point, but we're kind of a different animal now. So I wanted to explain that. So Lisa had reached out to me and wanted to talk to you, Oleander, about the MVP program. So do you just want to jump in?
Sure.
Okay.
So one of the things that we did when we first reformed was to look at the management plan. The previous committee had written. I think it's dated 1999, and we
Yep.
looked at their priorities. And one of their priorities back then was invasive management, specifically Phragmites, some other things too, but they were really interested in maintaining and controlling the Phragmites. And since 1999, I think there's been some work done. We're not really sure. We're still trying to compile information from all the people that have been involved in the bog. But we and the committee thought that would be a good place to take up. So the first thing I thought of was an MVP grant. And I wanted to run my rationale by you to see if it made sense for your criteria.
Sure.
And so my thinking was the importance of the bog, both for carbon and methane sequestration. Both, it performs both those functions, and protection of the archaeological digs there. I think there was a study done by UMass in the 90s also where they dated things back 3,000 years.
Yep, 3,000.
So to highlight both of those as interest for MVP and see if a survey, not necessarily to do the work, but to see if a survey, if we could do a grant to do a survey of Phragmites there, possibly by drone, if we could, figure out a way to do that and identify the Phragmites. So it wouldn't be a ground survey to start.
So, is this the time that you want me to talk, or did you want to say more?
You may speak.
Thank you. Invasive management projects are very difficult to get funded through MVP. We have not funded really any of them to date because we are a climate adaptation program. And so all projects need to demonstrate how they are an adaptive project, how they're like factoring future climate data as like the center of the project. And invasive species, removal tends to be, about responding to the given moment and not necessarily developing a plan or a strategy for dealing with invasives within a future climate projection. So like, let's say, a lot of our projects are looking at 50-year time horizons to see what, like if like for like a flood management project, for example, what would be the rainfall of that time and how to, figure out the challenges and potential adaptations to what that data shows. And invasive projects, those are really difficult to meet those scoring criterias within MVP. So it's not to say that you couldn't try it, but it might be a really challenging grant program to get this idea through. And Angela might have better ideas of other grant programs where it's a better fit for invasive removals than MVP is.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's helpful. That was my concern, and that's helpful.
I have some thoughts and suggestions.
Great.
So I think in terms of like where I could, being somewhat familiar with some other MVP grants and projects that have gotten funding, I think that if you were to think holistically about how water is flowing through Kampoosa Bog and the fact that water flow has to go, Mass Pike is involved as well as Route 7. And like, is there vulnerabilities associated with either of those infrastructures that you could seek funding for to improve both the hydrology, how water is moving through the bog system, as well as protecting like the infrastructure? Like I know there's been a lot of, issues with flooding of Route 7 related to like some of the beaver ponds or the beaver dams that are like south of the Mass Pike crossing that like have caused ecological issues. So there might be ways that you can kind of tie together some of your ecological management goals with some of the infrastructure goals. I think it just probably takes a little bit different approach to how we can nest those things together.
Mhm.
is about like if you wanted, if MVP funding is like, is there a way to, what I've seen like when projects can be really successful is when you can pull together like multiple benefits together and like really identify how these things are all interrelated. Like, yes, Phragmites is a problem, but like, let's think bigger than Phragmites and what other, solutions can we kind of come up with and find different funding pieces that maybe address each of them. But if you can come to funders with a bigger vision, it can be a little bit more compelling at times. And so then also with if you did really want to just say like ultra focused on the invasives, I would say that the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, they have their habitat management grants that they have been funding annually each year. And I believe Kampoosa should be relatively eligible because it has to be protected property, which it all is pretty much, I believe, under permanent protection. So that does make most of it eligible. My experience with this funding source, I've had a lot of successful grant applications with it. The timeline for the activity is what makes it pretty much like you can't do Phragmites treatment with it because it's when the funding gets released, the amount of time you have to finish it up in a year to like close out the grant, it's like not in the window of like when you control Phragmites. And I think that, and if you're thinking too more of like a monitoring and assessment, like where is there Phragmites, that is also really hard to get funding for. A lot of grants don't like, they want to, do action and implementation. And so the monitoring can be a much harder thing to get funded, or you just have to like look to different funding sources that might do that kind of approach.
So would Mass Division of Fish and Wildlife would they do the monitoring with the treatment?
They have an open project, Mass Wildlife.
Meaning?
They applied for invasive managements for Kampoosa and Agawam.
And they went out to bid and nobody jumped on
I'm not
it,
sure
right?
I'm not sure where it stands, but it was a few years ago, maybe.
Was this the burn?
Yeah,
Or the treatment.
it was the
Yeah.
burn and
We
the treatment.
we talked about it in one of our first meetings, because I went to the MassCom or ComMass or whatever that website is called to see what they had gone out. Nobody
Nobody had bid on it.
bid on it. There were two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I believe Chris Bulow is a partner
Yes.
from Natural Heritage, and I work with him on several other wetland restoration sites in the Southern Berkshires and doing some like comprehensive permitting to try to like kind of cover our bases when we're talking about managing at these like these really ecologically complex sites. And so there usually is invasive plant control and prescribed burning, like a lot of things lumped in together. And I know that it's been a problem that, the Nature Conservancy has also faced with just getting contractors like available to do the work, has been a growing challenge throughout like the western part of the state. It's there's a lot more funding and projects and activity, and the contractor pipeline has not grown as quickly as the funding sources have for these kind of projects.
Interesting.
Yeah, Chris Bulow was the one who presented the project.
Mm-hmm.
We got that
Yeah.
really beautiful email from him, and then
And then nothing.
he never got back to me.
Disappeared, yeah.
Okay.
So can I ask a question about the mapping of the Phragmites? Like what's your goal behind having that information about where exactly there's Phragmites within the bog?
So then to know how much of the area would need to be treated and where it needed to be treated. Right now, we don't really know.
I think one of the challenges that we have, because the committee dissolved, there was all this energy and knowledge and a lot of stuff happening in that area, much of it positive. Then it dissolved. Some of the people with the institutional knowledge retired. Offices that had 10 people working in them now only have 2 people working in them for some of the nonprofits that were involved. So we know things have been happening in the ACEC and around there. We just don't know what's happening and what hasn't happened and who's doing it, who's not doing it. So I think one of the things that we're concerned about is, if I'm sure there's other invasives besides Phragmites, we're talking specifically about that, but I think we're talking about, just in general, what's happening there and is it causing harm or is it not causing harm? There were endangered plants there, some endangered animals there. We don't know if they're still around. So that's one thing we've been trying to get our hands on in general on the committee. So I think it's to try to understand what's the state of the bog right now. We don't really know.
Jess Toro would have that information.
And we've asked her many times.
Because she was the one who came to the concert. She was on the committee. It sort of went downhill after Judy Spencer died.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Jess was the one who was doing the Phragmites removal, and there were acres and acres, and she had kids that came out for 3 or 4 summers to help with the removal, and it was very successful. But that was years ago, and I'm not sure but she would have a baseline, at least to what they achieved
Yes.
without, but I don't know where we're at now.
Yeah, and we've invited her many times, and she offered to go out to lunch with me and talk, and she just hasn't, she's been too busy to come to a meeting or to follow through on
Yeah,
that.
she's up to her eyeballs.
Yeah, exactly. And she also.
I can provide some of that information and background. Jess used to be my supervisor, and I had taken over the role of TNC rep for the Kampoosa Stewardship Committee while, many years ago. Like I started with TNC in 2005, and I actually was one of those seasons, like the kids out there clipping Phragmites for all summer. I've spent many days up to my waist in Kampoosa Bog. I've done the mapping. I've like transects of like all sorts of invasives. And so I still have a lot of access to all of the GIS data and the maps of like, I was very involved in the management of Kampoosa Bog until probably about 2009, 2008, when I left to go to grad school. And then, yes, there was like a lot less TNC capacity after that to like continue. And Judy had passed, I think in like 2007, I believe, because I know she passed like while I was still on the committee. Yes. And so I do have like a lot of access to that legacy information. And so I think that, we had pretty ambitious plans for like how we could manage Kampoosa in a way to like have really strong goals of like reducing the invasives. But it's knowing the amount of fragmentation that was there and like the influx of like the seed sources you get from the Mass Turnpike and Route 7, it's kind of like you have to have like a realistic perspective of like what your goals are at the site, because you're never going to rid them of invasives. Like there's just never going to be enough resources to do that. And so, kind of how can we think about like what are the best outcomes with, reasonable resources available for the site.
If you could get us some of that baseline information, that would be helpful. And do you think TNC has not been there since about 2009?
Our land steward has like, we've been out and about at times, like in conjunction with our state partners, if they've like asked or invited us. But yeah, I mean, we used to have crews of like 5 or 6, seasonal interns and summer staff, like out in Kampoosa, like for months at a time. So our effort is it's not that. And, we don't have that capacity anywhere for any of our sites anymore. But I know that like we've gone out to do some, like, there's a couple rare species in Kampoosa that we use as like a means to like training staff on how to ID things, because they're readily available to kind of get search images for when we're looking in other rare wetland sites as well. So we have been out there, but we haven't been involved in any of the active habitat management there in many years.
Has anybody talked to Kay Siddiqui?
Yes. She was here,
Early on.
joined our meeting, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago. Yeah, and then I followed up with her a couple of months ago. She had a fire or a flood?
Right.
Flood or
Lost a
fire?
lot.
Hurricane.
Lost a lot.
Yeah.
Hurricane, yeah, so maybe it was flood. Yeah.
Yeah, so I
can follow up with her
overlapped
again
with
then.
Kay a little bit, and I like recreated. She had done these transect surveys across Kampoosa. I want to say that was probably 2002, maybe, that she had done those, and I had attempted to redo those transect surveys when I first came on. So that would have been like 2005. But like what we were seeing is that because like the bog doesn't freeze the way that it had when Kay was able to do those surveys. And so like even then I couldn't find a time during the winter time that the bog was frozen enough that you could actually walk across the entire thing. It was too treacherous to do that. So I do think that your idea of doing like a drone survey really is going to be your best bet, just because the terrain is so treacherous. We used to have to access from multiple different routes and via canoe at times, like depending on which parts of the bog we wanted to get out there on.
We had to get permission from Mass Turnpike to get on there. They had to go out with their people and allow us access to get off the turnpike into the bog from the north. It was a fascinating experience to walk out on the bog.
Bureaucracy.
Terrifying, but fun.
Okay, so I want to do we have anything else? Oleander, do you have anything else you want to share? Do we have anything else for Oleander before?
I have one question.
Okay.
Do you know Les Luchonic? And has he been involved at all recently?
I don't know who that is. Are you talking to
Leslie
me?
was my supervisor for a little time at the Nature Conservancy, and because he started the ACEC program.
Right.
And so he was probably involved in, I'm guessing that's how you know his overlap here. He hasn't been, he worked with TNC for a little while, but he's not with us anymore.
Okay, because he was one of the state people that was involved when I was on the original committee, because my land is in the ACEC, and my parents gave land for in conservation for that property. So I was just wondering, because he was the sort of expert from the state that was involved.
Oh, Leander, I do have one question related to how this might overlap. I know that when I've been looking at a lot of the data layers for not just like the Massachusetts funding, but like the federal funding as well, that this area does show up on like the CJ40 communities. And so is there, what other kind of like funding sources might they be eligible to think about? Or does that, like, if we can weave the kind of the community resiliency thing into a unified vision, like, does that make it more, applicable to MVP funding?
Yeah, Patrick White was asking me similar questions, not specifically just about Kampoosa, but for Stockbridge more generally in federal funds. And I think it's a really important question of like, but, for some of the other grants that are dealing with like, that touch people a little bit more directly, like the Solar for All projects, like those types of ones, I think it might be an easier connection. I don't know. I'd have to look at a map to understand how it would then relate to like the Massachusetts EJ maps. But I think there's like always a social resiliency component that would need to be touched to be a super strong MVP action grant project. But I do think.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That your point, Angela, that like taking a wider lens is always a really strong, approach of like thinking about like, what is the climate resiliency of the bog? What will happen in the future? Doing that type of a project, factoring in climate change, to like build a management plan that is a climate resilient management plan, not just like thinking about the current conditions. There is, definitely opportunity there. And last round, Allison Dixon from HVA had submitted an expression of interest for a culvert replacement that connected to the bog. And I know that it's an area of concern for Mass DOT. And so that Allison then eventually got in touch with Mass DOT, and I would be happy to help connect those dots, because that I know that once Allison had connected with Mass DOT, that they were very interested in being involved in these conversations. So I can easily point you in that direction. But that's, again, it's an infrastructure focused project about culverts. And I also know that Patrick White is very interested in thinking about, well, many things, but one of them is well, groundwater recharge and water, both in the Stockbridge Bowl and drinking water access. And so, again, going from a broader perspective, I think that there could be an opportunity to think about it from a water resources angle. But so like, this is sort of like we're getting everybody on the same page of like, Stockbridge is eligible to submit more than one action grant. But just to make sure that you all know what everybody's doing and what would be a priority project.
Allison was involved in the early years too. So she would
We're
have,
involved in everything.
she would have long-term knowledge.
So I just want to, I want to actually close the loop on the wildlife crossing thing because a letter was sent to the Secretary of Transportation, federal, right, Pete Buttigieg, on behalf of Mass DOT saying, we feel strongly that we should have an improved, larger culvert for wildlife crossing. I think it might be the same thing that you're talking about, Oleander. So I think that that's underway, further along than maybe you were aware of. Isn't that exciting?
I know nothing about it. I don't know that it was a mass wildlife crossing project. At least when it was shared with MVP last year, it was focused on flood management, but it might have taken a different.
I think it's the same. I believe it's the same project. So it's making a culvert much larger so that wildlife can pass through and it also can reduce flooding in that area. So,
Great.
yeah.
So what are CJ40 or EJ maps? What do those stand for?
Justice for it.
Environmental justice.
Yeah, the environmental justice map. So there's like Massachusetts has their own map layers of like which communities they're highlighting, and then the federal government also has theirs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do we have anything else?
This was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah,
It was very, very helpful.
appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. And if there's anything else I can do, just let me know.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you.
holiday.
Thanks, Oleander. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Okay, so that takes us to the next agenda item, which was CPA funding.
Same question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We sort of talked about this in our last month.
It's a tough one, like for a lot of the reasons that Oleander spoke of. How does it, I mean, I suppose it can come under the heading of preserving open space, but it does not have a public component, so
Right.
that's a problem. In other words, people can't go out and poke around.
Please. Yeah, there's not even a bench to sit on.
Right,
To like look
so-
at the view.
So in terms of CPA money, it has to have that component.
Okay.
Okay, so that's,
Because we've had to deny a couple of projects
Yeah,
that
no,
we'd
that's-
rather not, but we had to because they did not have public access.
Okay, I had a note from our last meeting that to check if the Department of Environmental Protection has grants for at least doing a survey of invasives. So I have poked all around that website. It's one of those websites that goes in circles. You click on something and then it takes you back to where you were before. But I'm gonna still try to poke around. Do you know
I think
any?
Angela just said that there might be a Fish and
Well,
Wildlife.
Fish and Wildlife, yeah.
But that would be DEP too.
Oh, Fish and Wildlife is
Yeah.
under DEP? Oh.
No, Fish and Wildlife
Kind of,
is
kind of.
under DFW.
Yeah.
Oh.
Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. And so sometimes it's also helpful to like, if you can frame in some of these where like they might not, you can kind of frame it as like a monitoring, like, oh, we're going to do before and after monitoring associated with our management. And that's how you can, sometimes sneak in some of those monitoring activities, but it kind of depends on how expensive the monitoring component is compared to the implementation or the habitat management action. I think the other, so you had, obviously this is part of the ACEC area, and so, which is under DCR,
Right, I was
Department
just
of
gonna say
Conservation and Recreation. And so I do wonder if I'm blanking on her name. I'm working with her on a couple other projects. I'll think of it in a second, that she does a lots of invasive and habitat management related work. She's an ecologist with DCR, but she's focused, Nancy Putnam. She has been kind of the lead for the ACEC program since Leslie Luchanik had departed and left DCR. Nancy has been one of their lead ecologists that does a lot of help with towns and in different areas with doing habitat management and restoration work.
How do we contact her? Do you have an email for her?
Yes, I can put you in contact. I can just email Nancy and like CC you all and say, hey, they're looking for resources. We're kind of working on a similar project in Mount Washington, the town of Mount Washington, and they have two ACECs in their forests, and we're kind of trying to think collectively, how do we, there's multiple partner organizations involved in kind of a town-wide planning effort for, forests and water.
Nancy Putnam.
I know
Okay.
her well.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, so if you, I don't have an email for her though. Obviously, I don't know her that well. But I have her email. I went to school with her, I know her.
Oh, really?
So,
Okay. She might
I'd
accept
be
your
happy.
lunch
She
request.
might respond, actually.
Okay.
We had the folks out for Gould Meadows recently, Andrew Madden and Alex somebody, and I can't remember what his last name is, and Karen, whose last name I couldn't possibly remember how to pronounce her.
Karen Caljo.
Yes, but I couldn't even begin to spell her last name. And that was a really fascinating discussion they were talking about burning a local field. And they had some tremendous base of knowledge and Andy had been involved with the project for Kampoosa and Agawam. So he had some.
What organization is Andy from?
He's the district manager for DFW.
DFW,
Western
yeah.
District.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's based in Dalton.
Oh, so Rich probably knows him.
Yeah, Rich is talking.
Andrew
about it.
Madden.
Oh,
Yeah.
Andrew Madden. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
you did say Andrew Madden.
Yeah.
Okay, then I heard Andy. I got confused.
So anyway,
Okay.
yeah, so he has a long history as well.
Maybe we need to have him come be a special guest
Yeah.
a little bit.
And I
We
think.
definitely need people to help.
And I
point
think
us
he's
in the
really
right direction.
interested also.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, so I serve on, so there's a group of, and I think we've talked, Kampoosa has come up before. So it's a team of staff from the Nature Conservancy and Mass DFW and Natural Heritage. So it's Andrew Madden, Alex Entrup, Karen Lombard from TNC, Rennie Wendell, Mike Jones, the state herpetologist, Alex Entrup's the fire boss.
I've spoken to him before.
That was
so
Alex, what was his last name?
Entrup,
Entrup.
it's ENTRUP.
Yeah, I've talked to him on the phone before. Okay.
Yeah, so we have a team and we call ourselves the Berkshire Fens team because we kind of, we really specifically manage 2 big rare wetland complexes similar to Kampoosa in terms of how rare these habitat types are down in Sheffield and Egremont. And so there's definitely been times where we've kind of also talked about Kampoosa or Agawam Lake or other things because it's some of our funding is lumped in with some of the funding that that Chris had gotten for the NRD funding for all the restoration work that he was trying to do across several of these important wetland types. So
What is NRD?
that's the Natural Resources Damages Fund. So
Oh.
that's when GE, the last big pot of funding from the GE Housatonic pollution, they had given that out a couple years ago. And Chris was able to secure quite a large amount of money to do restoration work at 4 of these different calcareous wetlands in Kampoosa, I believe was one of them.
They were out here doing work in Sheffield. That was one of the
Yeah.
reasons they were here, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're like this team, there's kind of a core team of us that do talk a lot about like a lot of these important sites and how do we resource them well and how to, what are the biggest actions we should take to secure them or make them better. And it's like, it is really, they're just inherently very challenging sites to work at because of the terrain, the number of rare species that are there make it really complicated to do. It's just very administratively heavy, I feel like, to do restoration work in these places because you have to do so much rare species monitoring associated with them. You can't, like in other places where they're not so sensitive, you can just be, you have to be less delicate about every approach you take. And so that is one thing that, like, I think working in a place like Kampoosa when I got started was just like everything is more complicated at a place like Kampoosa.
Makes sense.
So could you keep us in the loop now that you know we're here about
Yes.
what's happening? Because I think part of what we feel is there's things happening and we don't even know they're happening. So you can.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. I mean, we've just been like through like a couple like different like transitions in our program in the last couple years, and like my job now is like working a lot more with municipalities and our partners to like basically leverage funding and get federal funding and like partnership groups like you all that are coming together and trying to get going. And you just need like what is like to be connected to the right people and resources, and that like that's a lot more of what I'm trying to do in the next couple of years in the western part of the state. So it's like kind of a good timing for you guys to be asking for a lot of resources, because that's kind of what I'm trying to do right now, is to connect with a lot of groups and help connect people to funding resources that are gonna get the great work done that you all want to do.
Angela, where are you based? What town?
I live in Lee right now.
Oh,
Yeah, so I'm local.
okay, that's nice to know.
Yep.
Okay, so I wrote down Nancy Putnam and Andrew Madden. Louise, I know you invited Angela here. Did you have anything specific you wanted to?
So thank you very much for supplying the geochemical study design of Kampoosa Bog from 2002. There's this section at the very end about goals for long-term geochemical study of Kampoosa Bog. And there are 4 or 5 items, six items on it. And I didn't know if this just went to the Kampoosa, if you have a memory of this going to the Kampoosa Stewardship Committee in its earlier form and just going nowhere, or if any of these was acted on by anybody that you know. I just don't think any materialized.
I don't have a specific answer to that. I mean, I remember working with Amy Rhodes from, I think she was at Smith College. And she was the she might've been the author in that report, and that like she had lots of long-term monitoring stations that were up. And so she was, I think it started with just like trying to understand the salt chemistry, like how is the salt from the turnpike and Route 7 coming through the system, and how is it like making it more suitable for Phragmites, like that the salt is actually creating this Phragmites problem, and then also just changing the chemistry as well throughout the bog. So I remember that was kind of one of the original goals, and I think it turned into something much bigger, or like definitely bigger than what they originally started off with, but I don't know where exactly they left off with that. Like you said, I think we had like a lot of great collaboration, and a lot of like the committee was just like, they had a lot of access to people, to like organizations to apply for grants and oversee projects and implement things that allowed a lot of great work to get done during those years. And that, when the Nature Conservancy had to step away as a lead partner, that definitely, like, I know it had impacts on how successful it could be, as well as like just, some of the other partners not having capacity anymore either. So I don't know.
I was on the committee when this was done.
Okay.
when Amy Rhodes was doing her studies. And I remember it was really interesting, the whole salt versus, how does salt have some effect on the, and they actually had come up with some indication that certain sides of the road where the water flowed off the road and off the turnpike tended to have more Phragmites, and they attributed it possibly to the salt content and road salt. There's still a monitoring station off of Rattlesnake. I don't know whether anyone is looking at it anymore, but it's still there.
Is Amy Rhodes even still around? I mean,
Yeah, I
maybe
don't-
it's worth
No.
reaching out. Is there a phone number on that document?
There is not, but,
But, would
Yeah.
you?
I'm sure I could dig up, I still have my emails, like they go back to a very long time. So I can do some digging and see if I can't like pull up a contact. But I think that, yeah, like, and if Amy's not still around doing research on this kind of thing, I think that like getting connected with one of the local universities, like getting one of the professors excited about Kampoosa Bog as like a place to do cool research, and that it has a wealth of like, the fact that so many surveys were done there, whether it was like the water chemistry or the vegetation or the invertebrates, like that's a really special, unique thing that this place has that a lot of other places don't. Like if you wanted to say like in 20 years, how have things changed? Like that's a powerful, example to lead with, that you have that data to go off of. So.
and this is just a general question about Phragmites. But if the bog is just left to just grow however much Phragmites it can grow, I'm assuming that everything about the hydrology of the system changes. Is that a fair question? And if
Yes.
that is so, how does that not affect climate change problems that come down, 20, 50 years from now? If the bog doesn't handle water the way it used to because Phragmites is left unchecked, is it resilient in any way? Is it prepared in any way for handling increased water volumes and warmer temperatures in the future? I was kind of gobsmacked by the comment about it sounded like there's lots of money for infrastructure, but the nature itself provided this thing that enables us to handle water, that handles water without our, intervention in a particular way. And if we just let Phragmites take over, that will change, won't it?
Well, it won't be a bog anymore, I would think.
See, I don't know. I tried to find research on whether it would still be a bog if Phragmites took over. I couldn't find anything.
Well, I think the fact that it's 60 feet deep in places is, the thing about the Phragmites is that the rhizomes, the roots of the Phragmites are so pervasive that they, but I don't know how, they can't get down that far, but they can create their own mat kind of on top, in which case they would,
Yeah.
in which case they would crowd out the native species.
But is it still a bog? I don't know if you know.
It's not,
Angela.
it's not actually a bog.
It's a
Or a
fact.
fence, sorry.
I mean,
Yeah, so I mean, I think that yes, Phragmites can be like in these like road corridor areas, like it can actually serve as like nothing else can live there. So like it, because they can be like just so polluted with salt and other runoff chemicals from roads, like Phragmites in those areas can actually do a benefit of like they provide some ability to provide something that's green habitat and can do some kind of filtration. And so it's not like Phragmites is horrible everywhere, but it's like in a place where Kampoosa, where you have so much other really rare stuff there, instead, you definitely don't want a bunch of Phragmites when you could have something biologically so much richer. And so I think I'd have to think really critically about like, what does a bog full, what is the vegetation full of Phragmites or a bunch of invasive species? Like, does that have a impact on the infrastructure downstream? Like, does it make that, is there less water absorption capacity in the bog that like could affect Route 7, or is it preventing flooding of Route 20 and 7 and that whole area south, south of it into Stockbridge, like before it gets to the Housatonic, or it does that, like, maybe it doesn't matter. Like, and so sometimes like we don't want to stretch for answers, but like it could matter, but I haven't really thought about it. I haven't like investigated how a mat of acres and acres of Phragmites, because there's definitely places, if you've ever been down into New Jersey, and like the acres and acres of what used to be salt marshes are now just like Phragmites. I think, what there could be is that Phragmites burns very differently than a fen of like natural vegetation. It's highly flammable. And so like it is like, it's dangerous in a fire perspective if it's like not being managed appropriately, but usually wetlands don't also catch fire. So it's like, it's not like a dire circumstance, but it's something that, when I've seen wetlands, when we've been doing some prescribed fire in wetlands, the flame lengths in Phragmites are completely different than when you are in like a natural, wetland vegetation. I think it's definitely worth exploring what some of the impacts could be.
So I tried to do a literature search on those questions. I really couldn't find much. So I know I'm asking you a lot of questions and to do a lot of things, but if you really find some studies that have been done, I'd appreciate it if you send
Well,
it. 'Cause
the folks
I did look and I couldn't find anything.
The folks that came and talked about Gould Meadows, we did talk about Phragmites to some degree, and the problem with Phragmites is that the mat underneath, the root structure is so thick that even fire doesn't really get to it. So, because we were asking about how that works, and they said, it just has not been as successful as they would have liked to see it be.
Which is why they snip and drip instead.
Yeah.
Right. We had really great success at the wetland that we manage in Egremont, where we used a marsh master, which is one of those tracked amphibious vehicles. It's really low pressure, and it can like basically roll over like small shrubs and stuff like that without breaking it because it's such a low pressure vehicle. But we did do like an herbicide treatment of the Phragmites, and then we did like a fall spray, and then we did a March mow when the ice was still formed on the wetland to like break down everything. We had like really amazing success of like regenerating the native vegetation with that, and very like minimal impacts. And we were very happy with how that went, which is like, for me, like, I started with a clip and drip, like every individual stem we would cut and drip and haul it out. So it's like a very, it's progressed throughout the years, some of the technology and resources available to us. And so it was a way to really effectively treat like several acres of Phragmites within just a couple days.
Well, that was the technique they were going to use on Agawam. So, but they didn't do it, so I don't know.
All right, Angela, you have like such enormous knowledge. Is there any other place that you can think of that you should point us to before we let you go? I mean, we are trying to figure out resources. We're trying to figure out what's been happening there and what hasn't been happening there. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's helpful for me to kind of see where you're all at and what kind of, pathways you're looking at exploring. I mean, I'm connecting with a lot of different state and federal agencies right now and all different sources of funding that are meant to, help groups like you, like I mentioned. And so I think that probably one of the best things like, if we can get you linked up with like one of the state agencies that's willing to kind of really like be your liaison to connect you and fund and minister projects, like that's, I think, going to be the best bet that you have to like launching more implementation projects. And I know our files are a bit of a mess right now, but I do have so much information that as I dig through it, I can try to connect you with and send off more. Like I said, a lot of it too is just like, it's like nuanced by like rare species and data sensitivity agreements. So I can't like share everything directly.
Of course.
But I mean, Kampoosa, I have so many amazing stories about Kampoosa. from my young, when I started my career. So it's a place like I'm definitely like really passionate about and glad that there's a group like interested in wanting to move things forward. So do you all have anyone from the Marian Fathers that's like
Yes.
collaborating
Yes.
with you? Okay.
Yeah, Arthur is on our committee. Do you know Arthur?
Oh, great. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
He just
yes.
wasn't able to make it tonight. And then Rich
Okay.
Bradway is also on our committee. He's the president of the Stockbridge Land Trust.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, no, that's wonderful. So, yeah, I mean, I think that I have it on my radar. I'm going to connect. And if you have any more, any specific questions, you have my email address and I will, do my best to get back to you as quick as I can.
Okay.
And so I'll
And then
definitely
you're-
reach out to Nancy
Thank
and
you.
connect
Great.
her. Yeah,
Okay.
all right.
Thank you
Well,
so
I'm
much.
Thank you, thank
Yeah, I
you.
got to get to my kiddos, but thank you so much. And I hope you have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you very
All
much.
right, bye-bye.
I know.
So Tim Simmons, who was with DEP, always said that there were native Phragmites in the bog, in the
Yeah.
ACEC. I don't know how apparently you have to really know the difference to be able
It's
to
interesting
tell.
you say that because there's a little teensy bit of Phragmites on the corner of my property. I'm on Stockbridge Bowl. And when I identify it using my app, it says they're the native ones, but I don't really,
I don't know.
the apps
I don't know
aren't
how you
100%
tell.
effective. And meanwhile,
They
I'm
will
digging them
probably
out anyway. I
still
don't really
spray.
care.
Yeah, they'll probably
Yeah, I'm
still
digging them
spray.
out. I don't, because they're also mixed in with some
Yeah.
other bad stuff. But, I mean, it's like this much. It's like just a little, but, yeah, I don't know. Well, that was very helpful. I think,
I think it's interesting that she was one of the kids that did
yeah,
the
yeah,
clip and rip.
I know. Half her life has been spent
Yeah.
putzing around that bog.
So if she
Yeah.
gets us Nancy's address, I'm happy to reach out to
Okay.
her and see
That would be
if
great.
there's DCR grants.
And then, do you feel okay looking into whether?
Yeah, I can see if I can track down Amy.
Yeah, or somebody at Smith.
Yeah,
who knows where
very.
Amy Rhodes is, because if they're still monitoring, I mean, she said they
Absolutely.
had many monitoring stations, and you said you think there's one for
I know
sure.
that
There's a
there's the
bunch.
one that's
There's
a bunch.
that's just.
Oh,
right
and
Like-
that talks about how many there are?
Yeah, there's a bunch of wells and they talk about converting one to use it in a different way in the future and all this stuff. And, and I think those were actually installed, I think they mentioned it here or in some other paper, in 1999.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, I think that's when they went in. So, yeah, no, I'm happy to see if she's
Okay.
still there and what
Great.
the interest
And then I'm gonna reach out to Andrew Madden and see if I can get him to be a special guest, or if he thinks he's not the right person, if somebody else is,
Great.
but it'd be nice just to be able to
I think
pick his
he'd be a
brain.
good one, yeah.
Okay. Okay, great.
How was the state person?
Good.
Yeah,
Good, a lot of good info.
I'll have to watch it.
okay.
All right, so next, I just had recap of Berkshire Gas Company permits at 9 Lee Road, just in case everybody's not all caught up.
Though I know you guys are, because you were on the committee. I watched the select board meeting, which denied, I don't know if you knew this, they denied the permit, it was unanimous.
Okay.
So the two permits that were requested, and I believe that because it was denied, I don't think they can work there anymore.
Oh,
Because
no,
they
they
don't
They
have,
can continue to work, they
Yeah.
just can't do what they
They
were
can't do the
doing.
new stuff.
Do
The
what they
things- the
wanted to
things that
do,
were
okay.
originally approved.
so they
and
can still drop off, pick up, store, empty.
Whatever was originally
Yeah,
approved, they can
okay.
still do.
Yeah, which
And they can come back again.
Yes,
they
that's
can
true.
come back
Yeah,
again.
that's true.
Well, it sounded like, and obviously it was, I don't know how much really represented what was going on when we heard the neighbors, but
Sure.
it sounded like that there were activities going on that had not been permitted.
Yes, a lot.
That those then
apparently.
had to
Decades.
toot sweet and, they could only do what.
Well, they had to get rid of all the tanks and they had to get rid of, there were 270 some
Something
odd
like that.
tanks that they had there that were not permitted. And we're still trying to look into whether, when they did the paving, was it something was it 10,000 square feet or more? Did they get their stormwater
Did we
permit
lose
from?
power? Because I was
Yes.
watching the meeting and
Yeah,
it
we
just
did.
went
We
off.
lost the
Yeah.
internet
Okay,
and then it came back
because
on.
then I went to my Stockbridge email right after. I was like, well, let me check my Stockbridge email, and it wasn't working either. And I was
Yeah,
like, okay,
it
it's an
probably was
outage.
down for almost half an hour.
Okay, because
and it came
then
back
they
on.
went before Concom, but power went out or whatever, or
Yeah.
internet went
So
out.
the gentleman that
Concom
came.
Did you guys continue?
We continued. The gentleman
Okay.
that came, at one point, he said, now, is this Stockbridge? Like, he didn't.
Like he didn't know what this
Well, he
was
said he was
about.
just told that day or the day before that it was even happening.
Yeah, he didn't know where, he said, what was
didn't-
the address?
Yeah,
And
he
we're like,
didn't really know what was going on. So we asked a lot of questions.
Okay,
and
buddy.
then you were gonna
Did he
email.
represented Superior Plus or somebody else?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
he-
didn't have any answers.
Okay.
And then there's the buried mercaptan.
Well, that's what
which is
was
really scary.
That I'm
But I
very
thought that
concerned
was
about.
what is not, wasn't that part of
But I
one of the
asked-
permit requests, and that was not approved by
No,
select board?
no, the mercaptan there was a buried tank.
800.
Or there is a buried tank there, and apparently it has not been, it was originally installed, and I'm not sure that there was any permit for it, but it was originally installed when they were taking the gas out of Tennessee pipelines and putting them
Oh,
into
right.
the big ones.
Yeah.
Because they had to add the mercaptan so that you get that odor.
Smell, yeah.
But once they stopped doing that, which they did who knows when, they stopped taking the gas out of the pipeline and they started doing just tanker filling, which they weren't permitted to do.
Right.
That the tanker filling comes with the mercaptan in it already.
Oh, so they have this
So there's this
tank that maybe hasn't
that
been
nobody
touched or
knows
used.
anything about, really,
Or
whether
where
there's
it is.
stuff still in it. Well, no, they know where it is because we saw
But
pictures
what-
of it.
Right, but when we asked him where it was, he didn't know.
Well, I don't think he knew much of
Yeah.
anything anyway, but the thing is that, is there still stuff in it? How long has it been decommissioned?
And
What
how-
is happening to it? Is
Is
the
it
tank,
leaking?
is the tank,
Just
you know?
remediation.
Yeah.
And did they do any soil
I
testing?
mean, this should be
You know?
brownfield time,
Yeah, absolutely.
frankly.
Super fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys continued it to your next meeting because of the internet loss.
Well, no, we kept going in the
Oh,
meeting.
you did keep going?
Did keep
Oh, okay.
going, but he didn't have any answers.
Oh, it
So
sounds like he wasn't the
we
right guy
asked
to
him
show
some
up.
questions and then you were going to email him more
Right.
questions. And we
Okay.
said we'd like answers for the next meeting.
Okay. Anything else do we know anything else that's happening at any other of the town boards regarding this property? I don't know.
Well, I don't know, the question that the lawyer asked at the meeting about zoning, it didn't go anywhere at the select board meeting, but I hope the zoning commission or whoever.
Kate was on.
Kate was
at the
there.
Kate
meeting,
was there, so I
so-
would hope they're gonna pick that up.
I mean, we know it's a
because that was
residential district.
That was a fair question.
Yeah.
But it's grandfathered.
Yes.
So I don't think that there's
Okay.
anything that can be done about that. I mean, you
What
know.
is the process for grandfathering? In other words,
It has
once.
existed before.
okay, Once approved, it's
Before
it was
always, yeah.
And just because the regulations change, if it went
If you've been
into
doing it.
effect before the regulations changed, then it's
I
grandfathered.
do wonder, though, if you are operating outside of the law and permits, is the
Right.
right way to ungrandfather
Well,
a grandfather?
I think that's
Yeah.
part of what
You
he
know,
was
so I
asking
think
for everything subsequent.
That's worth exploring
Yeah,
for
but that's
somebody.
not us, that's
Yeah.
zoning or
Right.
planning.
That's
Okay.
Nick. But I think the question he asked was a fair one. The stuff that they're asking to do now, that was unpermitted by the original permit in 1972. I think that whatever hasn't been permitted since then that is not in keeping with the residential neighborhood may possibly be not grandfathered and therefore not permittable.
Right, the trucks, there were many trucks.
But I
throughout
think
the
that's
day.
a big deal.
So are there activities that were permitted in 1972 or 82, whatever the years were, that are still going on that were permitted
Well, they were
functions?
originally permitted to do the siphoning off,
Yeah,
however they
which
went
is
about
ceased
doing
and-
that
yeah.
from the what's now Kinder Morgan. But they aren't doing that anymore.
Yeah,
So
they've
the
stopped.
original
They're using it as
purpose,
a depot instead, kind of.
yeah, the original purpose of the permit is no longer functional. So I don't know, that
Yeah, that's
seems like a
interesting.
town council kind of thing.
Yeah, zoning board of appeals, something, you know,
I think that lawyer will
yeah,
follow through.
okay. Good to know.
He was one of my husband's
It's-
students.
It's Nick, isn't it?
He's good.
One of the Ariandi kids.
Isn't
Yeah,
it Nick
he's good.
Arianti?
Yeah,
Yeah.
He knows more about
Yeah.
zoning than any.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't, they're not
county, I
gonna,
think.
to be continued.
Interesting.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the update.
I just wanted all of us to have all the same
Thank you.
information.
Yeah.
just
So is
because-
it on our agenda for next week?
Yeah, will be.
So come if
I
you
haven't put
can.
out the agenda for next week.
No, but I'm just so letting them know if they want.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
good. All right, so then that sort of leads me to the next thing, which I had communication with the community. When we first were created about a year ago, we sent I think the first thing we did was we sent a letter out to
the abutters.
people in the ACEC plus the abutters, just saying, hey, we exist, this is when we meet, here's our email address, whatever. And we got a little bit of interest from that. I guess I don't have an answer for this, but I was trying to think, what's the next thing? And I think if there was something happening at 9 Lee Road, I don't know if the town will be sending out a communication to, I mean, there's people with lawyers, so maybe not, but I was
Yeah,
trying to
that's
just
gonna
think
get
of what's our
complicated.
next,
I just wanted to say that
you wanna say?
that Lee was not involved in the original Kampoosa.
the documents make it look like they were.
The league Concom is on there and the
Concom
league
and Land Trust.
They were
Trust.
not,
They're in there as
They're
members.
listed as.
yeah, but they
members.
weren't,
Yeah,
they
members
weren't
with
function,
people's
they
names
weren't,
and stuff.
Well, they never responded to this commission when we reached out to
Someone
them.
was gonna reach out to Bob Jones, though. Did anybody reach out to Bob Jones?
No, maybe it was gonna reach out.
I
Yeah.
I talked about it at a meeting, I said, does anybody know
I could
anybody?
get,
Does
I
anybody know
probably should have, and I
anybody
didn't.
in Lee?
I can find my, in the minutes.
I've got Bob's, I've got
Yeah.
his email, I've been.
Not because
sure
I
it's
don't
not
think the select
functional,
board is necessarily the right person, but it'd be nice if
Yeah,
Bob could pass our
Ask
info over
us.
to somebody else, because they do have 225 out of the 1350 acres are in Lee. We
Right.
can't.
but I don't remember any participation from anybody in Lee.
Interesting.
Well, it's interesting because they're listed
They're
as,
listed with
as
people's
members,
names
as
and,
early members.
I'll have to
yeah.
go back and look,
Yep.
yeah.
But that was the first thing I did was reach out to the
Yep.
Concom.
yeah.
I mean, 2 or 3 times.
And then
they
you
get
go to
back
the
me.
you go to the Lee Land Trust website, and there's no way to contact anybody. There's no phone number, there's no email, there's no contact us. I tried Googling to see if there was a post office box or something, I couldn't find
Yeah.
anything. And then Rich said, he said no, as the Stockbridge Land Trust, he said no contact with Lee, so. Just think it would be worth
We had
at
somebody
least
come,
just
we had
saying, hey,
somebody
we
come to a
exist.
Concom meeting from the Lee Concom. She was new, young, and then she disappeared. I don't know what happened to her.
Okay, yeah, if you could reach out and just give us
Yeah,
a
I
name
will.
or something, that would be terrific. Okay, so back to communication with the community. I don't know what the answer is, I just wanted to sort of bring it up because,
I think Rich
we don't-
suggested,
did he?
I thought he had suggested letting abutters know what was going on with Berkshire Gas.
Oh,
I don't know.
okay,
I
okay.
don't know that we have to do that.
Yeah, I don't
But
either. I'm not
he-
sure.
He had made that.
I was
suggestion.
thinking just more from what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish, do we send out our vision and our mission statement to all of them? Is that a waste of time? I don't know,
I
what,
think the Lee thing has gotten to be kind of a big deal. I think people know about it.
yeah, the
Yes.
Lee
Yeah,
Road,
yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think so.
I agree.
Okay. All right, so maybe no answer there, but something I just wanted to,
It's interesting too, because that property borders Lee. It's right on
oh, it's on the
the
line?
eastern portion of that property. It meets the Lee border. So
I'm
that
sure
too
the
is
Adlers have
interesting.
been in contact with those people.
Yeah,
The
Or at
Lee,
least their lawyer has.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
I'm pretty sure they've talked to everybody that they,
He said they were representing 20
Yeah.
different households or something like that.
yeah.
The meeting was full. I mean,
Yeah, I
Every seat was
saw it,
vacant.
yeah.
oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Good, good, good.
Okay, so then the next thing, I just want to remind you guys, our next meetings are the 18th of December, the 22nd of January, and the 26th of February. Same time, same place. I might be joining remotely for the next one. I'm not out of town, but I'm almost out of town at that time, just to see how my week goes. All right, we don't have anybody from the public here, so no public comment. Do you guys have anything else?
I do not.
Right, so I move that we, do I have to move that we adjourn the meeting? I ask this every week, I'm so sorry.
Okay, make a motion to
I make a
adjourn the
motion that
meeting.
we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great.